All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it. We do have two remote participants, so we will read the usual boilerplate. Who would like to make that motion? It's Meredith and Mike.
I'll do it. I move that Michael Powers and Meredith Cole's request to attend today's meeting of the JMRL board remotely due to a personal matter, specifically travel, be approved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. We get the announcements, minutes of our August meeting. Comments, questions, additions? If not, can I have a motion to accept?
When we are attending remotely, is remotely listed in there? Okay.
Or just the first motion.
Yeah, but I was attending remotely, I thought, but I don't remember. It's been a long
I
time.
don't have them in front of me.
What'd you
Does
say your
the-
name was again?
I forgot.
I do not have you asked.
I haven't answered. It's
We'll
it's
go
been
back
a
and
long
check.
road.
I feel like.
It's been a
you did-
long
Yeah,
time.
you didn't make it last time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made it to the other one. Policy.
Right.
Oh, that's. Yeah, and I didn't make it. That was one thing.
With that note, can I have a motion to accept the minutes as submitted?
I so moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, announcements.
Yes, it's my great pleasure to introduce you all to your newest colleague, the new Charlottesville trustee, Siri Russell, longtime friend of JMRL. Siri is the Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of Virginia School of Data Science. That's a mouthful. But prior to joining the School of Data Science, Siri was the inaugural Director of Equity and Inclusion for Albemarle County, so she brings a wealth of experience in working with local government to JMRL's board. Welcome, Siri.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So if we could just go around the room and quickly give Siri our experience and why we're here.
I'm Ann, as I just said. I've been on the board for a couple of years, and before that, years ago, I was on the Friends of the Library.
I'm Brandy, I represent Louisa. I've been here for a year.
But I represent Charlottesville.
And I'm Tony, and I've been around far too long. This is my second term on the library board. I was on 2003, 2011, and came back right during the pandemic. And I work at UVA too.
And Tony was on the Friends.
You just can't get rid of me. That's true.
It's a good penny. I'm Martha Ledford. I represent Green, and I've been on for a few years.
I'm Alita Childs, and I represent Nelson. I finished up the previous Nelson represented, and I think I'm on my own now.
Yeah, in your first full term, you did 3 years of the previous term, so.
Thank you.
And then remotely, we have.
Meredith, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, how are you? I think I've been here 3 years. David, have I? I don't remember. I represent Charlottesville. I also work at the University of Virginia. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing for the Office of the Vice President for Research, and I'm a novelist.
And Michael, if you're available on the phone.
Yeah, Mike Powers. I'm a representative for Albemarle County, and I'm just starting my second full term in that role. I've also been an election official at the city of Charlottesville for about 20 years.
And then the only person we're missing is on the way. It's the third Albemarle representative, which is Peter Morville, and he should be here shortly.
Welcome.
Thank y'all. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Any other announcements?
I do. I have another introduction to make.
Yes.
I'm also pleased to introduce Dylan Padilla. Hello. Who is JMRL's new public relations specialist. Dylan started at JMRL in the beginning of September and hit the ground running. You might have noticed Dylan's graphic design expertise in JMRL's September newsletter and social media postings already. Dylan's a graduate of VCU with a BA in interdisciplinary studies and contemporary media. And JMRL is looking forward to the skills that Dylan's going to bring to the library's messaging. So, Dylan, you'd like to say hello?
Yeah, I want to thank everyone so much. It's been a terrific time already. It's coming up on my first month being here, and it's been so exciting. I'm getting the hang of things still, but I like to think that I'm doing a pretty good job so far. And if you guys have anything related to our public communications, our social media, our brand awareness, please feel free to shoot me an email or anything at any time. Or send one to Dan.
And I think that's all the announcements that I have, Tony.
So, public comments. Do we have anybody, is anybody in the room? Do we have anybody online?
If anybody online would like to make a public comment, please use the Zoom raise hand function now.
Move on. So for continuing education, David has graciously decided to talk about notary services at JMRL. And a little bit of context, not to steal David's thunder. One of the things we had talked about when we were talking about maybe revising budget categories and what paid out of where, is to realize that we do offer some services for free, which potentially we could charge for. I hope I didn't steal a slide or two.
No, that was going to be the introduction that I brought up as the board has been talking about how to potentially replace fine and fee revenue. This is one of the things that I've heard that we offer free notary services. And so I thought that I would give you all a continuing ed on what services are currently being offered and what kind of work that is. So I am not the expert here in this room right now. Krista is the expert. And Brittany Eversberg is probably the top authority at JMRL on notary services, but we gave Brittany a break today because you all saw her recently for continuing ed and you get the D-list continuing ed. So this is part of the staff efforts to provide the board with all the relevant information as it studies this issue about revenue and fines and fees. So without further ado, JMRL's notary services. So what is a notary? We'll start with that. The lawyers in the room might, Brittany texts to say she's here if we need her. So from the state, a notary public or a notary is any person commissioned to perform these official acts under the title. So they act as an official, unbiased witness to the identity and signature of the person who comes before the notary. Some more language there. Basically, the bottom line, I have myself been a notary and served as a notary at JMRL for 10 plus years, so I've got a little bit of experience with this. What you're doing as a notary is you are proving beyond the shadow of a doubt that the person in front of you is who they say they are. Basically, that if Peter came in to get something notarized, we would have to check all of his documentation, and then we're not saying that whatever he's notarizing is true. We're saying Peter is the one who signed. How do you become a notary? You apply to the state for a commission. You pay a $40 fee, $45 fee, which JMRL reimburses. Is that $45 is still correct? Yeah. If you're approved, you appear at the circuit court to claim the commission and you take an oath of office. So you stand up in front of their notary and you say, I swear to perform my duties as an officer of this. Not an officer of the
Quick
court.
question on that.
Please.
This is for staff only.
Correct. This is for JMRL staff that are applying to be a notary. These are the same steps that it would be if you wanted to apply to be a notary, except JMRL or any. So the notaries are not JMRL specific. The person is made a notary. They are not a notary for JMRL. They are a notary for the state of Virginia, basically. The employee does not get compensated extra for notarial duties while at work, but JMRL does pay for materials. So they get a seal, it used to be that crimper, and a set of stamps that come in handy and a logbook, some things like that. The library pays for those supplies. Notaries can perform the service anywhere in the state of Virginia. It's not local to a region, Charlottesville, Albemarle, Greene, Louisa, and Nelson. Requires renewal every 4 years, and JMRL provides training for all new notaries from a recognized expert in the state. We also periodically will get our notaries together. There's a listserv on staff for questions, because sometimes complicated issues come up, and so we rely on each other for that.
How many does the library have?
How many notaries? It's coming up here, I think.
I said that.
So what are the notarial acts? Like, what are the 5 things that a notary can do? They can take acknowledgements. They can administer oaths and affirmations. They can certify affidavits and depositions. They can certify true copies of documents, and they can perform a verification of fact. All right, here are my notes on this. Acknowledgement is proving the identity of the person in front of you. So the person signing it is who they say they are. There's a list of documents provided by the state. The person has to provide one of those, or they can be personally known. A notary can say, I know this person. A notary can refuse on any basis there. So they can, if there's any doubt that the person in front of them is the person that they say they are, a notary can say, I'm sorry, this is not enough documentation. The oath or affirmation is a person is who they say they are, and the notary is witnessing them swearing or affirming to the contents of the document. So the only difference between the two of them is that for an oath, the person says, I swear, and for an affirmation, the person says, I affirm. There's also, for the acknowledgements, there's a statement that's called a jurat, which is I am who I say I am, and I verify that this document is true to the best of my knowledge. So it's just like a next level thing there. Certifying affidavits and depositions, the person's who they say they are, the notary witnessed the affidavit or the deposition. Certifying true copies of documents, the person is who they say they are, and the notary saw that the copy was being made. So it had to be made in front of the notary. You can't bring in 2 identical things and the notary looks at them and says, yeah, these are the same. They have to see the copy being made. There are certain documents that notaries are not allowed to do true copies for, and they're like state vital records, like birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, things like that. Okay, this last one, verification of facts. I have never seen that before. It has never come up in my history of JMRL. Krista, no. So this is what it means in my research, though. This is more of a Department of Vital Records statewide issue. The notary directly accesses public or vital records to confirm or validate a signer's identity, credentials, or to confirm facts about an individual's identity or authorization. A notary may also access public records to confirm facts about such matters as corporate status, date of birth, or date of marriage. That's not something Brittany says she's never seen that either. So most of what the notaries at JMRL are doing are taking acknowledgements, and then I would say probably true copies. Those are the 2 kind of busiest items. Okay, notaries not authorized to marry people, just in case you were wondering. They can notarize divorce documents, yes.
Oh,
So here's a
okay.
sample of the stamps that I was talking about. So A and B. The first one is a certificate of acknowledgement. So our notaries will have a little stamp. So you bring in a letter, you wrote a letter to Santa Claus and you want it notarized. We can stamp it, say City of Charlottesville, Commonwealth of Virginia. This was acknowledged to me on this day by this person, and the notary signs it and gives it a registration number. And that way you can come in front of a court of law later and say, yes, I signed this document. The second one is the same idea for a copy. Okay, so across the state of Virginia, over half of the 94 library systems in Virginia offer notary service. The majority of those offer a free service at this point. Those that charge ask for $2 to $4 generally. The state law just changed on July 1st. Prior to that, you could only charge $5 for any notarial act in the state of Virginia. It's now $10. You can also charge for expenses. So if you're driving, if you're a traveling notary and you drive somewhere, you can charge somebody for the cost of driving there, and then up to $10 for the notary service itself. Anecdotally, and the notaries at JMRL will back this up, we have seen a lack of other options for where people can get things notarized. When I started as a notary at Gordon Avenue in the early aughts, people could go to the circuit court, they could go to their bank, they could go to various other places and get documents notarized. Slowly, those options have decreased. The banks will say it's only if it's a banking matter, if it's getting something notarized because you're getting a loan or something. And the circuit courts have been sending folks to. So we have seen an increase in demand. Okay, so here again is the answer to that question. The number of notaries at each branch: 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 total right now. Most of them at the Central Library. Louisa also has 3. And then you can see the notarizations per branch. So this is the last 3 full years 2,191, and the end of fiscal year 22, 2614 and 23, 2557 and 24. Keep in mind that 22, there were some periods in there, I believe, where notary services might not have been available still as the kind of post-COVID. It was one of the services that wasn't offered in fiscal year 21. I can't remember exactly when it got turned back on, but those numbers might be a little low for that. And you can see that far and away, the Central Library does the most notarizations, 890, and then Louisa is the second most. So there are 3 notaries there. That's one reason you've got more availability. And 2, there are no close options to the library and Mineral for a place to get things notarized.
I've noticed on Nextdoor, question at least every week, if not every other week, that, where is there a notary in town? And people give the usual options, and then everyone says, no, they don't do that anymore. They don't do that anymore. And then finally, JMRL rises to the top. And people say, oh, okay, I can go to the library here.
Brittany says in fiscal year 22, notarizations weren't open until May, and that was at the Central Library. So that number is a lot. I think some of the other libraries that started service earlier were offering it sooner. Some of the other libraries at JMRL. Speaking of Brittany, special shout out to her who did 388 of Central's 890 notaries last year. So these depend. How much effort it takes depends on what the request is. It can be a simple 5-minute thing where somebody comes in, they've got a letter or something, they just need you check their ID, you sign it, they sign it, they're out the door. Or it can be an hour or more. Sometimes when people are trying to get on a ballot, for example, they need notarized documentation for the however many amount of signatures they need to get on a ballot in any given election. That can take a long time. Other more complicated things, I know we've talked about how adoption processes, depending on where the parties are coming from, can be very involved and they can take a long time. It's a fine line because a lot of time people come to the library and they have kind of a lack of knowledge about what they're asking for here. And our library staff are not lawyers, so they're all very clear to say from the get-go, we cannot provide you with any legal advice. Like, here are the 5 things that we can do for you. And I'm happy to show you what those look like, but I cannot tell you, here's what you should do with your document. If you have a question about that, you need to take it back. Also, sometimes we're limited people acquiring the documents themselves will require witnesses. So sometimes people will come in and they won't have witnesses with them, and generally we will send them away and say, you'll need to come back with witnesses. We can't necessarily provide that for a staff. Sometimes at Central, it's fairly easy. We've got an administrative suite upstairs, and if Crystal runs to me and says, hey, will you come be a witness here? Like I usually can make time, but at a smaller branch, we've only got a few people working. We don't want the person to then solicit other people using the library to come help them fill out their documents. So it can take a while there. Most branches encourage and recommend appointments. So we ask people to make an appointment, set hours for here are the times in which we will be able to offer that services. Because not all the staff at a branch are notaries. So some of these here at Greene, Nelson, and Scottsville, there's only one notary there and they're open more hours than one person is covering. So if that person's not there, there's no notaries happening. Generally, our staff, because they are who they are and they're very public facing, they don't turn down walk-ins if somebody is available, but we reserve the right to do so just because it takes somebody away from whatever task they work with. Some branches can't offer evening or weekend availability due to staffing, it's mentioned. Okay, and here's just a visual image of that. Basically, you can see Louisa and Nelson are both blue, so you can't really see that well, but Louisa's the one going up. Northside's the one going down a little bit. I think they lost some notaries that were working at Northside, so they have less than they had a few years ago, and they can't accommodate as many. Oh wait, no, that's Central, and I think I'm colorblind here. Can't quite tell which is which. Yeah, Central and Northside at the top, and Louisa's is the blue at the bottom. I don't see a blue.
I think Louisa is the blue at the top. Yeah. Central Louisa at the top.
Thank you, Siri. I'm already making contributions from the School of Data Science. All right, let's ignore that chart. It's a lot. Okay, so that's just a very broad image of what the library is offering to the public there. It is a very popular service. We do get a lot of people thanking the library for offering it. Anecdotally also, we get a lot of people who finish the service and say, how much do I owe you? In which case we always respond, you already paid when you paid for your taxes, but here's some information about the Friends of the Library and other ways that you can support the library. So any questions about what the service is and what JMRL is providing on the board's behalf?
Do you get a foreign language documents? Is that a problem?
It depends on what.
We're not responsible for the contents of the
No, but
document,
still.
we're just responsible for
Yeah.
making sure the person is who they say they are,
Correct.
and also hopefully they know what the contents of the document, are, but I don't need to know.
Yeah, I remember a guy who had to come in every year, I forget which country he had,
Just say he's still alive.
to prove that he was still alive. Every year he had to come in and we had to notarize a letter in which he said, I am still alive, and he had to send it back to his home country so that they would say, okay, all right, great. Check in again next year.
Because a notary means different things in different countries too.
That's the thing.
So,
that-
yeah.
If it's in a foreign language, the services that we can offer are to copy it. We can offer it and say, this is an exact copy of whatever that was. Or we can say, you can acknowledge this and we can verify that Anne is who she says she is. Or you can take an affirmation and say, I swear this is true. And I don't need to know what the content of it was to say that you are you and you swore it was true.
And, I mean, this is probably not really relevant, but historically, have we always offered the service, as far as you know?
As long as I've been at JMRL, so 20+ years.
I think we started offering it, maybe early 2000s. I've been here since 95.
Mhm.
And I want to say around 2000. And because I had to use notary services a lot, so then I became a notary. That was the other issue.
And a notary.
So you
Yeah.
can't notarize for yourself and you can't notarize for anything you're a party to. So like my mother-in-law's will or my mother's will or whatever, you can't, you have to be not, you have to be impartial. As David mentioned at the beginning.
I don't have a question, just a couple of points. I have used the notary service at Scottsville Library a couple of times, and I was like, it just made me love the library even more that was a free service of the library, because probably my other option would have been, I wasn't going to drive all the way to Charlottesville just to get something notarized. I would have, there's online services that do it, but they're not cheap. $50 or whatever. So I think it's an awesome service. And I think that, when we had the bookmobile thing, she said that they were looking at doing it for the bookmobile too, which would be awesome.
They're currently not offering any service, any notary
Not yet,
service.
but
Yeah.
it would be really cool if the bookmobile was able to do it too for folks who are, not so easily able, even if they can find a place to do it, they can't necessarily get to it. So.
And we have in the past done off-site notary programs. I remember many years ago, we had a partner program with the senior center at the time where they were doing wills. So they had people meeting with experts to work on wills, and then they contacted the library and we came and notarized. It was open to the public, so anybody could come. It was just off-site at another location. So in terms of the hours that this costs, I mean, it takes quite a bit of time. You're talking about 2,500 of these a year away from staff. We're not currently compensating staff, so at any given moment, and we have had staff in the past say, I don't want to do this anymore, it takes too much work or effort, or I don't want to notarize these documents or those documents. You don't really, you have to offer it to everybody. Asking people to pay for it, so even if we charge the maximum of $10 a piece, and it was about 2,500 a year, you're looking at $25,000 there potentially. My guess is that you wouldn't see that fully realized. And we saw that kind of when JMRL started charging for interlibrary loans. It used to be a free service. It was free for everybody, and went to a $3 fee in like 2004, 2005 per interlibrary loan. And the stats went down and people just weren't asking for as much. So I think you would see some folks that would not use the service. I think they would potentially start charging for this. They would require, they'd be a little bit more exacting about their demands. Right now, you can say like, okay, well, how about next Tuesday at 4 in the afternoon? And if somebody's paying for it, I think they can be a little bit more.
So here's a corollary. I mean, we charge for faxing.
Correct.
We charge for faxing these?
$1 a page.
Dollar fifty. Okay, and we still charge for color printing, or we don't? Okay.
Correct. 50 cents a page.
We have these auxiliary services that we do charge for to people. It's not like somebody's gonna walk into the library and all of a sudden, oh my God.
Yeah, so I think that's a question for the board to be discussing as we think about that revenue from right now, the fines and fees for JMRL pay for all the equipment. So we're seeing a move towards, from our neighboring libraries and across the country towards not having overdue fines specifically. JMRL would need to replace about $125,000 a year, and this is one of the.
My suspicion is, and this is based on absolutely nothing, is that we would not charge $10. Even though the state maximum is $10, I think that, you know, something that, you know, we want to phase in.
Mike has his hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for this presentation, and I'm also echo the comment that I'm glad that JMRL is able to offer this as a free service. Since we're, you know, researching or just understanding the scenarios around charging for it, I just have kind of a technical question that was raised in my mind when you talked about the state law that the notary can charge $10 for an act. Is JMRL really providing this service, or is it more the fact that the notary individually is providing the service and JMRL is allowing, you know, time to do that within the organization schedule? So in other words, I'm just asking, and maybe this would be a question for further research, is it even JMRL service that we can charge for based on just the idea that there's a law around it that relates to the individual notary? Let me know if that question makes sense.
It does make sense. I think that's a great question and one that hadn't occurred to me, Mike, but I do know there are other libraries that are charging for it. So I'm not sure what the answer to that is. It would have to be probably run by JMRL's legal team or talking to other libraries to see what they're.
But if JMRL is reimbursing that the notary, so it's like.
And pay for all the equipment.
And paying for all the equipment, I would think that, yeah, that
paying
is a
their
service that.
We're reimbursing them for the equipment and paying them their salary for their job.
Right.
And then also paying for insurance, Krista mentioned.
Right, so but we're not paying them for performing that service, although we are paying the staff member for their time generally. It's just a question that is raised to me.
They're doing it during
work hours, yes.
I mean,
Falls on other duties assigned.
right. Well, you know, and my point about faxing, when somebody comes in and wants something faxed, the staff member has to go help them fax usually. So, I mean, they're paying for that, but that's a good, I think.
But there's not a state law governing how much you can charge to perform the service of faxing and who is performing the service of faxing. That's my question, is really about this law that's out there. Maybe I need to look it up and read it for.
Yeah, I think, and before we decided to put this in the budget, I think we'll just have to check that box, as David says, with legal counsel.
I think that's a great question that we would need to look into. And what I'm hearing from Mike is that we should charge more for faxing.
Other questions, comments, Susan?
I have two. One of them is, do we know, I know we know where people are using this service. Do we know anything about who is using that type of service? Is there any type of data that's being collected around who and what? And then my second is more of a wondering aloud. I'm wondering if you were to start charging for those services, is that the only thing that changes structurally? Like, are there other changes that have to be made as well to make this like a reasonable sort of revenue generating type of activity?
Can I anecdotally?
Sure.
Two things, because I wrote this down actually as we were talking. We do have on occasion businesses, so this would be attorneys, architectural firms, restaurants, like corporations, people who have a document that needs to be notarized as part of their business, which I feel is different than, you know, personal documents, you know, your living will or your advance directive or whatever. because these are folks that this is, I mean, they would have to pay for this somewhere else. So, we don't keep track of how many, but I have had that happen where an attorney brings someone in. He's clearly the attorney for this person, but he doesn't have a notary. So he comes and uses the notary at the library or at the architectural firm across the street, or there's a lot of licensing things that need to be notarized. So we do some of those things. So there's that. And then I think the other issue, and you kind of mentioned this, it's like our meeting rooms. Our meeting rooms are free. It's a free service. Once you start charging for things, and again, charging for notary, right now, if we make a mistake, if we forget to do something and they have to come back again, they didn't. It was a free service. We're doing this to the best of our ability. We've been trained and we're trying to do the best we can, but sometimes we're human and we might forget to do something. If we start charging for it, then I think that as David alluded to, the demand and the expectations increase. Yeah.
I don't know that we would get, like, Siri, to the second question about, like, structurally, would anything have to change? I don't think there would be more notaries coming in if we start charging, more like requests for notaries. Like, as a free service, I think this is topped out for how many we would get. But I do think we would have to tighten some things up about, like, if somebody's paying for the service, wouldn't want them to walk in and be told, no, you can't do that. And we try not to do that. To the first question, no, we're not keeping data except for the raw numbers of how many people we are. Each individual notary has a logbook that includes names, and does that have address data?
Names, address,
So we do have
type of
access
ID, type of
to
document.
addresses and names, but that's the only data about, and we've never correlated that. We've got 15 different logbooks that have 15 different sets of addresses.
I guess partly I was wondering, especially if you gave two numbers that seemed kind of far apart. Right? And so I also kind of wondered, I mean, to your point, Krista, about businesses and stuff, does it change how you advertise? I've actually gotten stuff notarized there too, at Gordon Avenue, thank you. It was a quick Google, but I don't think it was, but I didn't see, it wasn't like an advertisement that was directing me to JMRL for those services. It was that I, happened to be, my Google hand is strong. So I was also wondering about that.
Yeah, Brittany just told me that she's anecdotally hearing from a lot of people that they're learning about the service from our website. So I'm glad to know that people are learning about library services from the library's website. That's great. But it's not necessarily all people being told, no, go to the library.
I think you're getting some word of mouth too.
Yeah.
A lot of it's word of mouth.
And also other places are telling people.
Right.
The post office, people will go to the post office and say, hey, can I get
Or
something
even the bank,
notarized?
the bank
And
will tell
they'll say no.
I know at the registrar's office, when the people come in, they tell them to go to the library. And I wonder about the registrar's office too, if you could work with them, if it's overwhelming when people come in to get those signature pages. I know that's a huge thing, and I know they're extremely appreciative, because I used to be on that board. But I also wonder if it's if it's a burden for the library, whether some of that couldn't be, that the registrar's office itself should be doing that.
Isn't it a case that a notary, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong here, Brittany, correct me, a notary can't say, no, I can't, because it's gonna take up too much of my time?
They can say that, yes.
We have done that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought.
Well, we tell them to make an appointment, like if it's a real estate transaction or a will or advance directive, or someone has a stack of 20 petitions and they show up and say, hey, I have 20 petitions, and it's, 4:30 and we're closing at 5, and there's no way we can close the library and notarize 20 petitions in the last, so we
Or
ask them to make an appointment.
Yeah, the notary's not available, or the notary is involved in their day-to-day duties, they have to
On
work
the
at the
desk.
front desk and provide library service, and certainly we can say.
They're in a program, who knows, yeah.
So I would be very interested in that. In general, it has been the volunteers that are doing collecting the signatures, that are doing their own arrangements. So there's no coordination on that end. It's, each individual volunteer that's getting signatures is seeking their own notary, and they're finding the library on their own.
It's very seasonal, like,
Right.
we won't see any now for a while.
That does take a lot of time.
Yeah.
I could ask, I'll be there in November, just ask them why they're not, they're not notarizing these signatures.
So I'm definitely an advocate for reducing or, or getting rid of the fines and fees. So I do recognize that we need to figure out how to plug that hole if we go in that direction. With that being said, I really feel that it's worth thinking through the kind of the brand implications of charging for this. One is just like right, we're in a society where more and more institutions like universities and banks aren't these trusted institutions that help you out anymore. They're like, well, we're going to charge you or we're not going to do it at all, right? So the things that you could go into the bank for, they're like, we don't do that anymore. And so the library, is like the kind of last institution standing, helping people for free in a lot of ways. And I do think that there's a distinction worth recognizing between, charging 10 cents a copy for photocopying, where I think that, the perception, like my perception of that is, it's avoiding waste, right? It's sort of making people think about, the cost of paper and the machine and the electricity and so forth. And so it's not like the library's trying to make money off of this. It's like, it's just kind of keeping, how much do you really want to make these copies? And whereas the notary is perceived more as a pure service. I mean, I recognize like there's cost gone into the person getting, right, but it's not a ton of paper or electricity that's being, used up. And so I just think it's a little different when you're sort of charging for a pure service.
I think I have two thoughts on that. One is that that does remind me of when the interlibrary loans went in. We saw people that were making, not that they were frivolous requests, but they were asking for paperbacks for things that were available maybe at the university's library, like things that were accessible to them. They weren't asking for anymore because of that $3. And there are, I think, some notary services that would fall under that threshold. There are people who are like, oh, I might as well get this letter to Santa notarized. Like some of those might fall off. But two, I really take your point about the branding, and one of the biggest hits that JMRL ever took in branding was in 2010, 11, when they had a very few institutes. So currently, if you Charlottesville, Albemarle, Green, Louisa, or Nelson, it's $30 a year to join the library service. And that's the type of thing you're talking about, that the impression for the folks that had to pay that of the library system took a major hit. Now, they are not taxpayers in this area, so we don't hear quite as much, but the frontline staff hear that still all the time. So I'm cognizant of that.
I'm also concerned about, we don't have data about the individuals requesting this. And I'm concerned about economic barriers. We mentioned that we have people who are doing this for real estate transactions, but also, a will or something like this that has to get, official. And I would be concerned that people would not be able to do that.
Yeah, there's no, but evidently there's all the other places where you used to get it notarized, those have been closed up. And so it's the library.
Yeah, you can do it at central office in Green for free with witnesses.
Maybe a better corollary is the free internet. Okay? We offer free internet. You come in and use the computer. Even if you don't have a computer, you have access to the internet for free.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, across all demographic spectrum. We provide that service.
And you could go outside and do it,
Yeah.
Pretty incredible.
I think one of the things that this is just one thing we've sort of identified as a potential way to plug that $125,000 hole in the equipment budget. And as Peter said, the goal being perhaps to eliminate fines and fees. Maybe there's another way to do it. I think all of the things that we're looking at here are good data. And before we said, oh, yeah, we're going to charge $5 for that, we need to really, really study that.
Yeah, would we be able to charge for particular parts of the service with a different rate? So the lawyer coming in gets.
It seems like without any real data, it would be hard to do the type of analysis that you're talking about, right? To really determine how many of them are sort of commercial businesses versus folks who, I had a similar thought, Peter, but in my mind, then I was also thinking, well, how else are they gonna get that money? Right? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I think the shifting of burden is a good point. But I also like, without any information, how do you know if that's what you're actually affecting? And then if you start to break it apart and you start to see it go from 25 to maybe 10 or 15 in terms of the income that it's bringing in, then it also sort of, to me, starts to beg the question, is that meaningful enough to even make those kind of changes?
Tony, both Mike and Meredith have comments.
Who wants to go first?
I think I had my hand up, so I'll go, but I've actually used the service before and was really, really grateful to have it, but I did feel really bad because I pulled someone from the reference desk to do that. And so I think we really should be cognizant of the fact that they're not putting additional staff on the desk to do this. So when you do show up, like I did for my passport photo or whatever it was, I can't even remember, I did feel like I was taking someone away from the other patrons. So that would be my argument for why we should charge for that, because our staff is being used for it. And I think I would have been happy to pay $2 if we're saying we're going to do a very small, nominal fee. But the second part is, just like when you were talking, I realized like this is a way that you bring people into the library who may not normally step through the doors. And we have a chance to sort of say, here's what the library is, and here's all the other stuff, and they can look around. Because I feel like a lot of adults who don't have children, we often they stop going to the library if they're not tremendous readers like the people in this room. And it's really a nice opportunity to say, like, here's the library. Have you been in here recently? Here's all these other services and events and stuff we offer. So that would be, I guess I'm kind of going on both sides for you. Sorry, I'm not very.
Thank you. Mike?
Just, I'd share the idea of that. I'd like to know what's going on, and collecting data is a great way to kind of understand patterns and so forth. There is the other contravailing thought that came to my mind, though, during that part of the discussion is there are privacy implications to that. And, for example, we don't, to my knowledge, collect very much demographic data around our library card holders. I think we have, mailing addresses and so forth, and we know if they're adults or children. But I wonder if that could be a barrier to use if people think, oh, you're collecting my information and now it becomes a public record. And just another consideration, as we kind of think about possibilities around that direction.
Thank you. We do move on. Any other quick comments or questions? Thank you very much to David and Krista and Brittany for giving us the background here. All right. Next up, policy committee reports.
Sorry, I want to ask a question, just because I'm new here. So what did we just do right there?
That was called trustee continuing education.
Okay.
For every meeting, we have a presentation about some library service, okay? We've had one about the bookmobile, we've had one about the Friends of the Library, circulation, how things get into circulation. So every meeting, we try and allocate at least a half an hour for what we call trustee continuing education, so that we, the trustees, can be up to speed on how the libraries operate. So that's basically what we did. Now, we framed this in the context of, we're going to be talking about the budget. And as you will see, we always talk about the budget. The budget is not really an agenda line item. It's just always there, and we're always talking about it. And this is one of the items that we've been hashing over in the past couple of months. Does that help?
Thank you.
Okay.
No action, though. There was
No action, right?
Yeah.
Policy committee report.
Okay, at the last full board meeting, we had a continuing education about the materials selection policy. And that was a lead-in to the policy committee meeting where we subsequent to the board meeting, but it was in between then and now, we started a review of the material selection policy. That's a regularly scheduled 10-year review. And we did some research to compare other policies around the state. I think we had a folder of 20 or 30 of those and looked for common themes and started talking through our own policy and just sort of identifying open issues and tweaks and wordings and why is this paragraph here and what is it supposed to be accomplishing. So I think probably, I doubt that we'll have any draft at after the next policy committee meeting. It might be 2 more meetings, 1 or 2 before we have a draft to bring to or a recommended version rather to bring to the board. But that was our only topic of that we addressed at the last policy committee meeting. And we'll continue with that at the next one.
Refresh my memory, when is the next policy committee meeting?
It's, in theory, it's before the October board meeting. So it'll be in this room at 2 o'clock for the next October board meeting. And I'd like to take this opportunity to let Siri know that she's on the policy committee. Mike is the chair of the policy committee. You took Kathy Johnson Harris.
And David, I think we've been doing it at 1:45 just for everybody who's.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yeah, a little bit early.
Adding it to furiously adding things to their calendar from our listening audience.
And David, you'll send Siri what we did last.
Yeah, I'll send out an agenda for that meeting, a separate agenda, and some, here's where we are, some documentation there. In fact, I can send you what we've already done too.
Any questions for Mike? Comments? Great. Thank you, Mike. I don't see anything under old business on the agenda. Hearing no old business, we will move on to new business. Here we are in September, and we're about to do fiscal year 26 budget planning and prioritizing. And we'll turn over to David.
This will shortly be, to Tony's point, old business. Every month to talk about. Just remind everybody about the board's meeting and budget calendar. This is available on the board's webpage, jmrl.org/board-trustees. So right now we are at September 23rd. The board sets budget objectives and guidelines for staff to work on drafts. And then early October, Brandy's already got a personnel committee meeting scheduled for the first week in October to discuss the personnel requests that came in from staff. And then at your next board meeting in October, you'll listen to the report from the personnel committee on those. And then the budget committee will meet in November. And then on November 18th, the full board should be voting on a draft budget. So this is always up and available there. Just the only reminder there is that the November 18th meeting is in Scottsville. So
it is early because of Thanksgiving.
It's a week early because of the Thanksgiving week after that. And then the one thing that I realize is not on here because it's not a board action, but it is in the regional agreement that every year JMRL meets with what I call lovingly the heads of the 5 families. We meet with the executive department from Charlottesville, Albemarle, Green, Louisa, and Nelson to have a pre-budget meeting. We're scheduling that right now. It's supposed to happen before October 15th, and that's basically where JMRL lays out for them. Here are the budget priorities that the library board is talking about. Here are the concerns that we have going into next year. And every jurisdiction says, kind of their very early projections on what their revenues are looking like, what they're thinking about for compensation for their own staff. And it's usually way too early for them to have any concrete information there, but they kind of give us a sense of where things are going, and we'll give them a sense so that there are no surprises when they see JMRL's budget. Okay, but as this document mentions, in September, the board should be setting budget priorities. So based on the discussions that the board has had over the last few months, I prepared 3 potential priorities for you all to discuss now, to rearrange as you like, to add and remove. But the 3 things identified are securing funding to address lack of movement in JMRL's pay scale while work is ongoing on a new comp plan. That might look familiar because it was the top priority last year as well. And remember that last year the board did succeed in getting 5% increases for staff and 7% increases for staff that have been at JMRL for longer than 8 years. So that was accomplished last year. We're looking at a similar situation this year where the new comp plan won't be done from the city of Charlottesville. So we're trying to do what we can to move people along.
Well, and David, for Siri's edification.
Yes.
The fact that we mirror the city of Charlottesville in our compensation plan. I mean.
Well, we
is
lag,
that relevant to
we-
this or not?
we lag the city of Charlottesville in our compensation plan. The JMRL pays for HR support from Charlottesville, but certainly comp is a different animal over there. Like they are, they're dealing their own comp and they work closely with us on it, but we're in no way tied to what they're providing or with Albemarle or Green or Nelson. Is this too small?
It's on the back.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. The second priority is just to make sure there's enough operational funding to provide the same services that we're providing now. So what that basically is saying, like the subtext there, is not going out to add a bunch of new services for next year. So the most recent new services that JMRL has added have been bookmobile expansion to Louisa and Nelson County, the drive-up window at the Gordon Avenue branch. So those are over the last few years. And then finally I'm sorry?
Lockers.
Lockers at 6 of the 8 locations and the kiosk in Nellysport. But those weren't of the same scale as we're gonna look to open a new branch or add a new day or things like that. And then the last one is the plan for moving software operational costs from the JMRL equipment budget to the JMRL operating budget. So again, this is part of the conversation that the board's been having about fines and fees and whatnot. And as we discussed, there are software costs that JMRL has paid for out of the equipment budget funded by fines and fees that are no longer equipment, they are operational ongoing costs. I think what staff are looking for is a motion to, whatever configuration you all end up with after a discussion today, a motion to say, here are the things to prioritize while we're budgeting.
Additions, questions, comments about those priorities?
Are these in priority order? Or are they
Yes, 1, 2, and 3. This is based on what I've been hearing from the board, so they can be arranged in whatever order, or removed or added. Like this is a blank slate, right?
I just want to clarify too about the difference between this and our capital budget. So
We have no capital.
I know, but we're asking them for money for our for us. So I know that the city is asking their departments for VIP plus by October 1st. So, but that doesn't, that's separate from what these priorities.
We have a request that's out there from last year, thanks to your work largely, that the city and the county both have in their 5-year CIP plans. We will be resubmitting that with inflationary costs for this year. So right now, the schedule is fiscal year 27, architecture and engineering costs for the central library renovation, and then fiscal year 29, the actual project. So we will be resubmitting those and saying, hey, don't forget, you promised this. This is the time frame that's been promised. We expect that will be continued, but it might require some back and forth.
And the two jurisdictions have a separate timeline.
Right. They have each of them has their own timeline. Well, it's an excellent question. So yeah, it's good to keep it on the boards.
And that's part of the strategic priorities for the library,
Yes.
right? As opposed to the budget priorities.
Yes. It's part of the strategic plan. Right. And we could do another budget. Maybe it's a good idea to do another budget CD and get Jerry up here, but there are the operational costs, which are the people and the things that are in the buildings, right? That JMRL pays for and charge our local jurisdictions for. There's the state aid funding, which pays for our books and materials currently, and that comes from the state, obviously. And there's the Friends of the Library, which pay for our programs and whatnot. The capital projects, the only capital projects that JMRL is really involved in terms of paying for are vehicular. We need to buy a new truck this year, as it's been discussed, or these kind of in between things like the kiosk, right? It's not a new building per se, it's a piece of equipment, but it lives outside. I found a spider web in it the other day.
But no snakes yet, no snakes.
Recently.
So are we gonna make a motion to identify these as our?
Tony, let me make sure that Meredith and Mike don't have any questions.
I mean, are there other budget priorities that didn't make this list?
These are the ones that I've heard the board, these are the staff's focus and my focus at this point.
3 is good.
Yeah.
3 is good.
It basically means that when we're going through the budgeting process, as you know, I will present to the budget committee a couple versions. One, here's everything that JMRL is looking for next year, and here's some likely scenarios. And as we discuss the things that we can and can't afford with our jurisdictional partners, we'll use that list to go through to make sure that we're meeting, you know, that, okay, the top priority needs to be this, then we'll make sure that's the top.
So I think we're about to entertain a motion to make these our, the share back us. Make these our budget priorities for fiscal year 26.
Sorry.
Share a motion.
I shall move to make these 3 JMRL board budget priorities for fiscal year.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, everybody. Look forward to heading down that slippery slope. All right, the library director's report.
Okay, just a few things to report on today. One, this is library card sign-up month every September. So we've gotten some good press on that. Dylan arranged for interviews. It was very interesting, actually. It was on the corner. We went and did one long interview, but they've cut it up and released them every week, every Friday afternoon. There's me on the radio talking about library card sign-up month. So good press for that. Central Library will be hosting a Freedom to Read Trivia Night at Random Row this Thursday, September 26th. So it's an off-site program at 7 o'clock. If anyone's interested in submitting a trivia team to join this this Freedom to Read Trivia Night, you can contact probably Christopher. Just for the board's info, there's been a long requested offering is now available. Per a change in access from the New York Times, JMRL can now offer off-site access to the daily New York Times with your library card number. It was always in the library until very recently. So check out the digital library on jmrl.org for more information and instructions on how to access the New York Times if you're so interested. The JMRL staff are looking to change the operational hours of the north side drive-up window to free up staffing for other duties. There's some difficulty this summer in keeping up with delivered and returned items. North side is the busiest library at JMRL by far. So in looking at solutions, we started to look at data for the drive-up window. It's busiest on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so kind of middle of the week. And by far, the busiest time is 10 a.m. when the library opens. So it's kind of a little bit not what I was expecting. You know, I thought the hours would be kind of 5 to 9 would be when it was busiest. But it's busiest from 10 consistently until about 3 in the afternoon, and then it tails off for the rest of the day. So Monday through Thursday, the window was open 8 to 8:30, and it was the quietest time of the day, making up only 0.5% of all circulation for the last 2 years. So there are 54,000 people that have used the window in fiscal years 23 and 24, and only 262 of them were in that 8 o'clock. So it really tails off at the end of the day. We're going to try closing it at 8 o'clock Monday through Thursday instead of 8:30. Reallocate the staff to checking in, direct patrons to come in. They can still get full service in the library, obviously, and kind of review and revisit that in summertime. It was really the summer slam that caused the issue. For keeping up with the workflow for the branch. Anyway, I wanted to alert you all to that just in case you hear anything. If anybody asks you any questions, you can. And finally, don't forget the Friends of the Library's annual fall sale starts on October 5th through October 13th. The members' night is Friday, October 4th. So if you're a member of the Friends of the Library, you can get in for 2 hours on Friday night before the sale. And I'll be there helping them check people in. That's all I have to report.
Other matters, anything anybody else wants to raise, talk about, discuss?
I have another question. I always have questions.
Okay.
With the Friends of the Library sale, which is one of my favorite times of year, are trustees expected to, like, to volunteer there in some capacity or to show up or?
Great question. No, as Ann and Tony will tell you, the Friends of the Library have their own board. It's a separate nonprofit 501c3. That board is certainly expected. They'll all be there at the members' night and they'll be volunteering. So no, there's no expectation for our board, but if you're interested, you can reach out to me and I can put you in touch with the book sale manager because they're always looking for folks kind of during the week.
Members night was always a blast.
Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah, it's fun. And I think they raised the limit on how many.
$100. Yeah.
You can spend $100, which is a lot of stuff at that book sale on members night. So.
He started that.
That's right.
And you know, it's at Albemarle Square now on the old North Side.
Oh, yeah, I was at the last one.
Okay, great.
I think
Great.
you're taking me out.
Oh,
It is a lot of fun, and you'll see library staff and you know people who've been associated with JMRL and the Friends there helping out throughout the week. Mostly we're looking for books. Oh yeah, I'll be there to help you in just a minute. I'm looking for. I always say, don't tell the Friends I said this, but I'll find myself looking at a book saying that looks pretty good. I'll buy it, bring it home, and I'll look at it and say that looks really familiar. I think I've read this. I think it's my book. I see her and I just thought of it again. It's a circle of life.
Other questions, matters, comments? All right, agenda items, we will have a budget line item for next month. We're still here at Northside next month.
Next month at Northside, yes.
We do travel. Certainly.
Yeah, the travel season starts right after that.
Yeah. What else do we?
Personnel committee report. Should be a policy committee report as well. Those are the only two committee reports unless we get the technology committee.
We need to schedule a.
Yeah. All is tough because there's a lot of other stuff, so. Those two for sure.
Okay.
I don't have a continuing ed on the books, but Siri, I always put in a plea for board members. If there's something about library services that you would like to learn about, let me know and I can arrange for staff to do 10 to 20 minutes.
David and I will pad as necessary to make a full agenda, don't worry. May I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Aaliyah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Great. Here, make you feel better?
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Use that of that. I've had to.